All right, Totem Pro Nation, we got a good episode today. It's Friday. It is week 1 of college football. You know what I'm saying? College football tuned in last night and whatnot. But there was some very, very good games and maybe some very bad games. And, you know, what it says all is that college football, you're either that team or you're not that team. So we both have Virginia Tech apparel on because Virginia Tech plays Old Dominion at prime time in one of the best stadiums in America.
Main stadium, baby.
Yes, that I toured last year. That is actually on the channel when we first started. I've had actual evidence of Enter the Sandman when it actually came out. The facility is nice. The office is nice. The gym is nice. Everything about the Tech facility is nice. And their food is pretty great. It's pretty awesome. But
Top 5 in the country.
yeah, you're not wrong. Top 5 in the country. But I want to talk about last night's game. Utah, Florida, okay. First play of the game. Bryson Barnes, QB that came in a 70-yard touchdown pass. The first play of the game. First play.
Yeah.
Now, Florida got the ball first. All right, they got the ball first. I guess it's on second down, they try to go with a little jet sweep handoff, and the dude got smashed. But Utah was aggressive. Head coach Kyle Whittingham said at halftime when they were very conservative the first couple games, like every season they played a very conservative team, and he said he wanted to be aggressive. How does Utah do it with a quarterback being out? I think one of the wide receivers was out, and about 2 of our offensive linemen was out. They was the injured list on the game they had before they started. About 6 guys injured, they still won. How does Utah do it, and what the hell is wrong with Florida?
Yeah, so like earlier this week when we predicted this game, we both picked Utah, even though they didn't have their starting quarterback. I don't think we accounted for them not having, 2 dudes on the offensive line. Their center was a true freshman. He's been on campus for like a couple months, and now he's in a game as a true freshman against a big Florida D line. Now they didn't seem super fast, the Florida D line, but those are some big boys. And who's that guy they got from Bama who's like 420 or something? Like he's a big guy. So like they held their own very well. And I mean, just having the trust in your second string quarterback it was evident that because you're not going to throw a 70-yard bomb on the first play of your season if you don't have that trust. And I think they did a really good job incorporating both QBs. Obviously, 27-yard touchdown run by the third string guy, but both QBs had rushing touchdowns. I think going forward, I would go a little bit more with the first QB that came in just because he looked. I mean, if they didn't have a stud that they're waiting on to come back, I think I would be comfortable with him leading my team in anyways. Like he looked really good. He threw the ball well under pressure. He got out. Obviously, his touchdown run was on a scramble. So like they just got talent everywhere, man. Then you would never think that the Utah Utes would have more Florida talent than Florida, but that seemed to be the case. They were faster than them. They covered everything well. Like it looked over after like that second drive or third drive where Florida had to punt. After that, I was like, all right, well, they can't get anything going.
Well, yeah, that's what started it. But also, I think the very key factors is, I guess I was excited about what Florida's going to do on the offensive end. Okay, you got a quarterback, you got Billy Napier, I guess who's calling the plays and whatnot. I thought it was going to go some more up tempo with the offense, but everything came down to crashing. I think the part that really messed them up, it was a 7-3 game. They had Utah stop on 4th and 3. They had 2 number 3 jerseys on the field. That is very stupid.
Yeah.
I think one of the players was weigh number 33. So I think that's very stupid. That comes to coaching staff and the equipment person. I mean, you can't have 2 number 3s on the field. Also, another key factor in that game as well. They was I think it was before the second quarter or end of the first. They was in the red zone. They was in the red zone multiple times. 4th and 1, they got the left guard on both sides. Then it leads to a missed field goal. So it was a lot of mistakes. And like I said, I don't know if I predicted the score in this game or not, but I said it's week 1. There's going to be a lot of mistakes. I think Florida made little simple, stupid mistakes that you're making like pee-wee in high school football. Just dumb mistakes. And I guess that's what set it off. And by the way, Florida has a bad offensive line. That offensive line was getting manhandled.
And it's not an offensive line. It's not an offensive line I feel like you can run 100 jet sweeps off of. Like if you don't have a guy getting outside and like you don't have the biggest wide receivers out there, like who's blocking for this jet sweep? And it seemed a little Justin Fuente-ish Virginia Tech ball back there. It seemed like him and Corn's offense, man. And it was like it was obviously I'm not very high on running 20 jet sweeps a game and you know that type of stuff. But that's really what it reminded me of when I was watching it. And I was like, dude, you can't win a lot of football games like this if, like you said, the offensive line isn't there. And if you're choosing to run plays that don't go to the strengths of your team. Now, I don't know what the strengths of their team are because, like you said, offensive line didn't let Etienne get going at all. He didn't look like he was – I mean, I'm not going to judge him on the first game of the season, but, like, he just didn't – yeah, and man, the quarterback struggled. He struggled, brother. you can place some of that blame on the O-line, but I mean, just missed throws. He had dudes open, or at least throws that he could make into windows, and he just wasn't hitting those windows. Balls would be high, they'd be outside. It was not a recipe for success.
I mean, it's the first game of the year, so I'm not gonna really bash the man. But what I'm gonna say about this is also our totem pole member that I brought in last year, and Sarah Blake Chick, who is the queen of the SEC, who is the most beautiful woman on the planet, the Playboy model, but she knows football. And I scrolled through the Twitter, and you know, if I'm a Florida fan, I'm embarrassed. Here's why I'm embarrassed. Like I said, you fired Dan Mullen, which was a dumb decision. Billy Napier's not the guy, but I think somebody on Twitter randomly said, "Oh yeah, it's a good day to be a Florida Gator." And of course, the queen of SEC, Sarah Blake Cheek, was like, "This is not 2008. This ain't the SWAT Kings documentary. Okay, This is a different Florida team. It's like, you got Chris Leak, Tim Tebow, and Brandon Spikes, and come on, this ain't the 2018 baby. Come on now, them days is over. Them days is over. I'm trying to tell you, them days is over. But with Florida, Billy Napier is on the hot seat, ladies and gentlemen. He is on the hot seat because that is a terrible performance. Now, I'm not saying we expected him to be Utah, but it's just the way things was just it went south in the second quarter. Things went south, dumb penalties, and the confidence level went down at halftime. Luckily, they were down only 17-3. I think Utah should have beat them a lot worse, but Utah made some mistakes as well.
Yeah, they stalled on a couple drives.
Nate Johnson, I think, fumbled a snap as well, even though they still got a touchdown off that drive. So I'm not sold on Florida at all. I think Florida, like I said, is going to be another 66, 7-5 team.
Yeah.
I mean, they played a very tough SEC. I mean, you're not beating Tennessee, Alabama, none of that stuff. But for Utah, I mean, hey, you lose everybody, you still win. Utah does it their way. I guess Bryson Barnes should be the starting quarterback going forward. Not sure we'll see any Nate Johnson throughout the season, but we'll see how that goes. But also, I want to recap last night's game as well. The Matt Rhule era. Okay, so this involves the question. How do you feel about the Matt Rhule era? So Matt Rhule obviously he coached at Temple, he coached at Baylor, he coached Carolina. Then he comes back to college and he gets like a 10-year deal, 6-year deal with Nebraska. What's the hype around Nebraska? They had 6 straight losing seasons. Their last head coach was Scott Frost, whoever. He was the head coach at UCF. I don't understand why you take a job in Nebraska. I understand this is all modern and whatnot, but it didn't go well. He should have stayed at UCF. Like, he should have stayed. UCF was that team. And they're still consistently good with Gus Malzahn. But They lost again. They were up 10-3 against a very good, well-coached and the head coach of PJ Fleck in Minnesota. A very, very, very good team. And they're up 10-3, and then all of a sudden they lose at the end of the game. So with Nebraska, they've blown 26 one-possession games in the last 5 years. So are you sold on Nebraska? I know Nebraska is going to be a long rebuild. Are you sold on Nebraska at all?
I mean, not this year. You can't. I mean, your starting quarterback can't throw 115 yards and 3 picks in the first game of the year, man. I mean, that's embarrassing. I mean, you didn't have a rusher go over. Well, actually, sorry, the QB did run for 90 yards on 20 attempts. But like besides that, you have the next 2 running backs at 55 yards and 27 yards, and with only 114 in the air, that's not how you're going to win football games, especially in the Big Ten. Like the Big Ten is known for ground and pound, run it down your throat type football. And 181 yards of rushing is just not going to get it done. And I trust, though, I do trust Matt Rhule in terms of being able to flip success. So at Temple, he started, they were like 2-10, and then went like 3-9, got up to like 6 and whatever, and then his last year there, they were 10-3, upset Wake Forest in a bowl game. Like he flipped them, immediately went to Baylor. They were sucking as well, and he got them up to Big 12 champions. So I trust that he can do it over a span of time. Like his the 2024 recruiting class is already like 28th or something in the country. Obviously, still have a lot to go with that, but that's just the start, I think, for Rhule. It's attractive to recruits to go play for a former NFL guy. Now, how does tenure in Carolina affect how some recruits see him? I don't know. I can't speak to that. But I will say that there is a degree of faith that you can put in a guy who has shown success in the past at rebuilding programs, and especially programs that, well, maybe not Temple, but like Baylor used to be good, but it was like 15 last time they were good before Rhule had gotten there, and he got them back to where they wanted to be. Nebraska is a very similar team. They used to be consistently in that top 25, and like you said, 6 straight losing seasons. He's got some work to do, but I think he's on the right path, given the recruiting status so far. But what happened on the field it was just ugly.
Yeah, it was very ugly, and I think we're both smarter than some commentators. I wish I had a video I could put up there. So the play that Nebraska got beat by a touchdown, these commentators, I think, are very stupid. They said it was zone coverage. It was not zone coverage. They played man-to-man. They just had a linebacker that was, watching the guy and whatnot. If you don't know one-on-one football, it wasn't zone coverage. I don't know where these commentators think they know everything. It's zone coverage. Where in effect was the zone coverage? It was definitely man-to-man. It was just a linebacker underneath. Just because the linebacker's underneath does not mean it's always zone coverage. So,
especially with your quarterback running 90 yards in the game, like you're probably going to have a linebacker play like as a spy in there. Like you kind of have to if he had almost just as many rushing yards as passing yards. So like you're gonna need a spy to be in there. Now normally people would bring in like a nickel corner to play spy, but even if it is a linebacker, like that's not zone. Like that's.
People these commentators. We got commentators nowadays that never played football or never. Not that I mean, there's some people that never played football, but they never been inside the game of football. Like you played. I've been a player, a coach. I understand both sides of the game, but I mean, these commentators are stupid. I don't really pay attention to that. I just thought it was interesting that I bring it because it's like, where did I see zone coverage? He literally ran a corner route. He just faked in and went this way, and he dragged his toe in. It was a great catch. I mean, I don't know where you saw zone at. I played zone. I was like, he went with his man. It's not like if they were to cross. Let's say he runs a little crosser or whatnot, and they switched off. That's that zone they switched off. But he switched off. It was man to man. He had his man. He had his other man. Like I don't really understand that. But college football. Now, I said 8 teams outside the top 25 that are going to make the college football playoff, but there's not 8 teams. I did that on purpose to see if y'all were smart or stupid. There's not 8 teams. There is 8 teams, but there's only maybe 6 out of the top 25 that can make it, and there's probably 2 that's within the top 25 that will possibly sneak in like a TCU did last year. So, MattPatt, go ahead and pick your 2 teams that are going to possibly make the college football playoff outside the top 25.
Yeah, so this is bringing it all full circle. My first team is Baylor. So I'm going to start off with a funny stat, and then I'll get into what I actually think. So this is it's kind of a meme, but it's funny. 2019 and 2021, the Baylor Bears had great seasons. 2019, they made it to the Big 12 championship, didn't win. 2021, they did win it. 2020 and 2022 were terrible years, just disappointments. So just off the fact that this year is ending in an odd number, I'm predicting some degree of success. No, that's more of a joke than anything else. Let me get into why I actually think they could be good. They're returning the Big 12 Freshman of the Year at running back in Richard Reese. He had over 1,000 scrimmage yards and 14 touchdowns last year. And they're bringing him back behind a much improved O-line. They had gaps at a guard and a tackle, and they brought 2 dudes in from BYU that are immediate starters to fill those gaps. Now, how high in regard should we hold BYU O-linemen? I don't know, but their grades were great, and I think that they're going to make an impact right away. They're returning 3 of their top 4 wide receivers as well. That's a big deal when it comes to experience in college, like I was talking about earlier this week. When your team gets older and more experienced like this, it's so crucial because a bunch of freshmen out there running around, they can be as talented as whatever, but if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. They got a transfer from Mississippi State who's going to start at quarterback. He's 6'4". He was a very high 3-star, like borderline 4-star guy. He's a great natural passer from all reports. He just doesn't have experience. So putting a quarterback with less experience behind an experienced O-line that was okay last year and has gotten better this year, I think is, a good thing, especially having 3 of their top 4 receivers back. And to fill that 4th spot at receiver, they got a transfer receiver from Arkansas who's a burner. I mean, he's a deep threat guy. He can stretch the field like crazy. And they've got a new tight end who's like tight end 2 or 3 or whatever on the team. He's not going to make a huge impact, but they're not lacking depth. The defense last year was inconsistent. They filled in gaps, and the transfers are going to need to be able to adjust quickly to their roles to get the defense cooking like it was. Say in 2021, they had the 10th best scoring defense in the league. Go to 2022, they're down to 69th. So I don't know how a drop-off like that happens from 10th to 69th. And who knows, like it could just be that the year ends in an even number. So then I got, to finish Baylor off, they don't have the easiest schedule. Big 12 schedules are not SEC schedules, but they're not going to be cupcakes like some ACC schools. They have to play Texas, TCU, and Kansas State. All of those are very tough games. But if they can win 2 of them, now I don't know who, could be TCU, Kansas State, or Texas. I think Kansas State and TCU are the more likely opponents that they beat. But if they can win 2 of those 3 and take care of the middle of the road guys, there's a chance. I'm going to preface all of this by saying I don't have a bunch of confidence that this is going to happen. But given, what we're looking for, I think this is a team that definitely fits into that space. Next, this one is going to be an eyebrow raiser for sure. I don't know if you're going to agree with them. Illinois. So Illinois, 8-5 last year, not the best, but they have a much easier schedule this year. They're more talented than they were. They got a 4-star transfer QB from Ole Miss and Luke Altmaier. Dude, they had to play Michigan last year. They had a bunch of other ranked opponents. They only have 2 ranked opponents this year. One is Penn State, which I do think they will lose. The other one, though, is Iowa. Iowa had like a bottom 4 offense in the country last year, and Illinois' defense was the best scoring-wise. They only allowed 13 points a game. So they have a good transfer class coming in to back up that stuff. They did lose Chase Brown, their top running back, to the Bengals in the draft. So that's a big loss for sure. But they brought in 2 athletes that are now at running back. They have a returner from last year, or a returning running back from last year. And really, besides that Penn State game, I don't think it's the hardest schedule to go through. Now, Minnesota, we saw last night, can perform. Now, very low scoring game, which seems to play into Illinois' style, considering they don't allow a lot of points. So if their offense and this new QB can get it going, there's no reason that they shouldn't be able to beat a Minnesota or a Purdue. They lost to Purdue last year, which they shouldn't have. So really, I think it's down to coaching and how much these new guys can fill in gaps. Because the talent, I think, is there for them to go from, say, they were 8-5. I can see them having like a 10-3 year, maybe 11-2. But if they only drop that one to Penn State, look out. Now, again, just like I said with Baylor, I'm not very confident in this happening, but I do think that it is a possibility that those pieces come together.
Well. Now, I'm not surprised by Illinois. Now, Illinois was a very good team last year under Brent Velma. He did a very excellent job last year. So I'm sold on the Baylor one. I think Baylor could make some things happen. I'm not sold on the Illinois factor now.
Yeah.
I don't know about Illinois. I mean, they were good last year, but it's a different year. You know, there's teams that can be good. It's college football. We don't know. But I got 4 teams, by the way. 4 teams. It might shock you. It's going to really shock you. Now, the first one that is going to shock everybody, Texas Tech. Texas Tech out of the Big 12.
I looked at them.
Texas Tech. The reason why I say Texas Tech was very good last year. They're coming off a terrible last couple seasons, I guess coupled with Cliff Kingsbury. They got Joey McGuire as the head coach. I think he's in his 2nd or 3rd year. You got offensive coordinator Zach Kelly. He's very excellent offensive end. They got Tyler Show as the quarterback. It's very strong potential, but the quarterback, he has to stay healthy. If he stays healthy, Texas Tech might be some problems. The tools is there, and it's just a matter of fact of staying healthy. The schedule will be a little bit tough. They got games against Oregon, Kansas State, and Texas, but they're not going to be easy. And also, they do play the Oregon Ducks earlier in the season, so Oregon's not an easy team either because, they got Bo Nix in the quarterback position. And, Oregon's not a team that you mess with. I know they're not the same Oregon team when Chip Kelly was, when they had, Justin Herbert, Marcus Mariota, even Mario Cristobal, who was a former Oregon coach who's now coaching at Miami. It's not the same team, but, ladies and gentlemen, Oregon did win 10 games last year with Bo Nix. Bo Nix was an Auburn transfer. They did win 10 games. And I watched the bowl game. Didn't they beat North Carolina? I just want to make sure I'm correct on this. They beat North Carolina in the bowl game last year? Or did North Carolina beat Oregon?
No, North Carolina lost.
Okay, I want to make sure because I did watch the game.
Yeah, it was tight. It was a good game.
Yeah,
I remember.
That's why I didn't remember. It was a very tight game. So I'm thinking because I think it came down to like a 4th down or something like that. It was a very close game, but Oregon is not a team you want to sleep on. So that's something you need to watch out for. Number 2, my prediction, UCLA. UCLA did lose their quarterback, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I'm not sure if he made the Brown squad or not. But
he's third string.
Oh, he's third string? Oh, he made it. So good.
Yeah.
So they're one of the most underrated programs in the college football. The Pac-12 is loaded, but at the same time, teams are leaving the Pac-12 next year. Colorado already left the Pac-12. Utah's leaving the Pac-12 as well. A lot of teams leaving the Pac-12. 4 teams already left the Pac-12. So Oregon, Washington as well. So next year will be a whole different conference. But as of now, they're a sleeper in that conference. With the quarterback situation, they got Dante Moore, who's a 5-star freshman. He will be a factor at some point in time. The offense will easily put up points, but with the schedules featuring plenty of fascinating matchups and navigating the Pac-12 won't be easy due to TV contracts and whatnot. You know, they lost a lot of money to TV contracts, and the Pac-12 tried to get a subscription with Apple TV. That didn't work as well either. So the Pac-12 is a little up and down. And like I said, UCLA is not going to be a team to really watch because everybody's going to be watching Colorado and TCU tomorrow. That's what I'm doing tomorrow. I'm going to wake up and watch Colorado and TCU. Everybody's focused on Colorado. Everybody's focused on what primetime Deion Sanders is going to do. Everybody watching that game. Ain't nobody watching UCLA. UCLA play at 10:30 at night. But since Colorado's now, they got the Deion Sanders effect. If they play at 10:30 at night, we all go sit and say, hey, Colorado. So UCLA is one of those teams that can sneak up. We'll see how that goes. I think UCLA doesn't have like an easy schedule, but like I said, UCLA only lost 2 games last year. Nobody talked about it because, you know, the Pac-12 wasn't all that popular. Everybody was talking about Utah and USC. You know what I'm saying? Utah and USC was one of those teams. So the third team, South Carolina. Shane Beamer, ladies and gentlemen. Shane Beamer has turned around South Carolina. South Carolina hasn't been good in a very, very long time. They've been up and down. But he has one of the most talented quarterbacks returning into college football in Spencer Rattler. Now, they play North Carolina tomorrow. It's a home game for North Carolina because I guess it's played in Charlotte, North Carolina. I guess where they play the ACC championship game at. So
Panthers.
Drake May's obviously the better quarterback. I'm not going to say he's better than Drake May. Drake May's the better quarterback. Spencer Rattler, he's resurrected his career from, you know, QB1 in Oklahoma, where he got beat up by Caleb Williams, which he wasn't that good at Oklahoma. Caleb Williams was obviously a better quarterback. He was obviously a better quarterback. He could run, he could throw. Thank God that Lincoln Riley put him on the squad because Spencer Rattler was just awful. But it'll be a demand upward. The competition will be very, very intense, and they got tougher road games. But over the years, we've seen further improvement for Spencer Rattler. It's unlikely playoff run. You won't have to wait and see. But they do play North Carolina tomorrow, as if they beat them. But they play Georgia and Tennessee. They play Georgia and yes, they do play Georgia and Tennessee as well. So that's not going to be easy. And I think they do play Clemson along the lines towards the end of the year again. I think so. So those games they're going to have to win. Like you said, they're going to have to win tomorrow against North Carolina. They're going to have to beat Georgia and Tennessee, which I do not see that happening at all, unless Tennessee, I guess, just gets rid of everybody.
Tennessee's the one that I can see happening. Georgia, they're not going to beat Georgia.
Yeah, they're not beating Georgia.
And like we were talking about earlier this week, maybe the 4th spot, possibly the 3rd as well, you can get in with 1 loss. But I mean, like, those top 2 schools, I think, are going to be undefeated. And then the 3rd and 4th seed are going to have 1 loss each. And so you have to beat UNC, and you can only drop that game to Georgia. So then you got to beat Tennessee and you got to beat Clemson.
Yes, yeah. And then the last one I'm going to take is Kentucky. Kentucky, they were good last year. Will Levis was drafted in the NFL. They lost to Georgia. They consisted through a lot of injuries throughout the end of the final year, but they got Devin Leary, who was from North Carolina State. He transferred to Kentucky. He's going to work under Mark Stoops. That could be a good duo, especially with Will Levis. The defense was finished 11th nationally in scoring last year, which is not bad for the SEC. I mean, you're playing a tough SEC. And the offense can make a jump, and things could get interesting. But the schedule is a monster. Like I said, Kentucky plays Georgia, and they have home games against Tennessee and Alabama. And then is this team the next TCU that snuck in last year in the Big 12? So that's my 4 teams that will, make it. Kentucky's one of those teams as well. I think out of these 4 that I mentioned, it will most likely be Kentucky. We've seen Kentucky stay undefeated. They were like I said, Kentucky was 7-0 last year until they started folding towards the end of the year, until they lost to Georgia and all this other stuff. Kentucky was an undefeated team last year. So with Kentucky, we've seen it in Mark Stoops. They have a good quarterback in Devin Leary from NC State. We'll see how that goes along those lines. But like I said, they play Tennessee, Alabama at home. They're not going to. They might beat Tennessee, but I don't see them being Alabama, and they're not going to beat Georgia. By the way, they won't beat Georgia. They won't beat them. But you never know. I think the quarterback situation will be maybe a little bit better. I'm not saying he's Will Levis. I didn't think Will Levis was that guy.
Will Levis's stats weren't great.
Yeah, I didn't think he was that guy either. So out of those, we'll see how that goes. But to top off the 8 teams, I'll say that are inside the top 25 because there's only but 6 that we named. Notre Dame's going to be one of those teams. I'm not going to explain nothing about Notre Dame. We've seen it. Notre Dame has Sam Hartman. If they can beat USC, NC State, Clemson, boom, they should be in it. The other team that you could probably put in maybe is Penn State. Penn State with Drew Allard at quarterback. They won 11 games last year that nobody's really talked about. So they went to the Rose Bowl. They went to the Rose Bowl last year. So Penn State was a very sleeper team. The question is for Penn State is, can they beat Ohio State and Michigan? That's going to be the question. Now, we won't know. I think they have a better chance of beating Ohio State than beating Michigan. That's just how I feel about Penn State. But we'll see how that goes. But I think even so, Penn State was going to be a 10-win team. Just nobody talks about it because the big brother, like I said, in the Big Ten is Michigan, Ohio State.
Yeah.
Penn State is that little brother. They're the third guy. But that comes down to 8 teams. There's only 6 outside the top 25 and 2 within the top 25. So we named 8 teams, surprisingly. But like I said, it's college football. It's a long season. You won't see what happens till after Thanksgiving. So the next topic I'm going to talk about is NFL. I'm going to switch gears. Jonathan Taylor is going to be on the PUP for 4 weeks. But there was also rumors that he could have got traded to the Green Bay Packers and the Miami Dolphins. What in the world happened there? And why is the GM trying to say some things that I don't like? Meaning he tried to act like the situation didn't happen and he's not giving the man his money. And then there was a lot of turmoil going on in last year's organization. And the question is, will Jonathan Taylor be traded by the beginning or the middle of the season, or will he just be a Colt until next year?
So I think Peyton Manning tricked us into thinking the Colts are a well-run organization. It's been a shit show for the past 2 years, dude. I mean, obviously the whole Jeff Saturday experiment was a failure. I think it was in April, JT said publicly, I'm going to play out the rest of my contract. I put pen to paper, I signed my name. I'm going to do this. He gets a new agent. A month later, he comes out, or 2 months later, he comes out and says, yo, get me out of here or pay me way more money right now. Which I think is tough. So I'm not going to blame it on the agent or anything, but coming off of, he's obviously short career so far, but coming off of your worst year, he had 800 yards, only 4 touchdowns. He was hurt, and he's still hurt right now. Now, I don't know if he's hurt right now or if he were to be on a new team, his knee or his ankle would be feeling fine all of a sudden. That seems to be the case in some instances with other players. But the running back market right now, as we've all learned in the past month or so, is awful. No one wants to pay him. And I think when you're in a position like the Colts were, when you have the 4th overall pick last year, you obviously were not very successful. So, Chris Ballard, the Colts GM, they don't seem very eager to pay him. And one of the reporters asked him 2 days ago, I think, because he was talking about the trade value and stuff. And a reporter asked, he said, like, hey, well, if you value him so high, why don't you pay him so high? And Chris just looked at him. He didn't say anything more than these 4 words. He said, we won 4 games. We won 4 games. He said it like 3 times. So it seems to me that with a new head coach in there, new staff, they're not super pressed to build around the running back as much as building around Anthony Richardson, which obviously having a good running back is a pretty good start to that, I would say, especially a dual threat quarterback like Anthony is. If they have to account for both of these guys in the backfield, you're loading the box more, you can get guys open quick on, like these outside routes. Whereas if it was more spread out with not having JT in your backfield, it's going to be a little bit harder for a rookie QB who already didn't have the best passing numbers at Florida. Now the Packers have been in talks. The Miami Dolphins apparently was BS. The GM for the Dolphins came out and said, we never sent an offer of any sort. Like there's no official offer made. That thing did come out with them asking for Jalen Waddle or whatever, which,
oh my God.
I mean, you gotta. So I don't know if it was like as egregious as some people on the internet were saying it was, but a young wide receiver behind Tyreek Hill, who already said once his contract is done, he's retiring. You can't compare the value of a running back in today's running back market and Jalen Waddle. Like he's going to be a superstar once he's wide receiver 1, and you could argue that he's already a superstar now. So, I don't know if he's going to be traded I don't think he's going to be traded by next week. I think the Colts' expectations of what they're going to get back are just way too off from what it seems like the other 31 teams in the league view running backs as. I do think that by October it's a possibility, like after he comes off of the PUP list. But even then, like he could be traded week 3. He still had to sit out week 4, and then all of a sudden his ankle's perfectly fine, and he could be a stud somewhere else. So like, I don't know. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they were just like, all right, dude, sit out. We can go through this same process next year because you put pen to paper that you're going to be on our team. Like they don't have to do anything. Now, is it best for the culture and a new head coach and a new staff to establish positive vibes and get this negative guy out of there or re-sign him to where he's all happy again? Yeah, but I mean, we've seen the Colts just be a tornado of just bullshit for the past 2 years. So, I mean, we're all going to see it at the same time. I don't think anybody has a better opinion than anybody else on what's going to happen. I think nobody has any clue.
They hadn't been the same team, I guess, since they had Phillip Rivers at quarterback. When they went 11-5 and they made the playoffs with Phillip Rivers. Even with the good Andrew Luck team before they retired with Chuck Pagano as head coach, they were pretty decent. They had 3 11-5 seasons with Chuck Pagano.
They went to the AFC Championship like twice.
Yeah, they played the Broncos and they played the Patriots. So, I mean, it was just Andrew Luck had a bad offensive line. He was always hurt. He was forced to retire. Just imagine you still had Andrew Luck to this day. I think the coach would be good. They'll still be good, but they just fell off. And I think from watching Frank Wright and All or Nothing when they had the episode of All or Nothing for the Colts a year ago, not last year, the year before last year, because they had the Cardinals last year on All or Nothing or a season around with the Cardinals, which was on HBO Max. He's a very gentle coach, but I think with the problems they had last year, and he got fired after they lose to the Patriots. The quarterbacks, they can never understand the quarterback situation. I mean, you had Jacoby Brissett, you had Sam Eckler, I mean, from Texas. I mean, they went through a lot of functions at the quarterback spot. They don't know who quarterback to start. Then they had Nick Foles at quarterback. I mean, oh my God. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, Nick Foles was better with the damn Eagles. Now, I understand the Eagles couldn't pay him because, you bring Jalen Hurts into the equation and whatnot. But, I mean, you really brought Nick. I mean, the Jeff Saturday stuff was pretty bad. I mean, come on now. Well, Jeff Saturday was a former Colt. Well, you being a former player and being a head coach of an NFL team is completely different. I mean, what in the world? You were up 33-0. I turned the game off. Now turn the game back on. It's 33-28. I said, excuse me? 33 points. I said, what? I thought you had Minnesota. I thought Minnesota just had a bad game. They laid the egg. It was Christmas Day. I mean, I was watching NBA, and then all of a sudden, they lose in overtime. And just Jeff Saturday, it was bad. And his clock management, by the way, last year's game versus the Steelers on Monday Night Football, his clock management was just horrible. It was just bad.
He never coached before. He didn't even coach high school. Like he has literally never coached before, and he won the first game, and then it was all just downhill from there.
The Colts need to find something different. I think Shane Simon would do all right with Anthony Richardson. Like I said, they'll be last in the division, though. They'll probably be third because the Texans are going to be worse than the Colts. But that takes on the next topic in the NFL. What is the expectation of the Las Vegas Raiders? You got Jimmy G, porn star Jimmy. You know what I'm saying? Stephen A. called him porn star Jimmy because he hung out with a porn star and whatnot. And wrong place and wrong time. You got Josh McDaniels, who's apparently someone on the hot seat. Is Mark Davis going to be patient? By the way, Tom Brady is a minority owner for the Raiders, so that could play in some key factors. Josh Jacobs finally got signed. He was a leading rusher last year. He finally got signed to a one-year deal, but I don't know if it's long-term. I have him in my fantasy, but I don't know if he'll be there long-term. He didn't get hurt last year. You still have Devontae Adams. What is the expectation for the Raiders? I think are the Raiders going to make the playoffs? I mean, you have a better quarterback than you did. Derek Carr was falling off a little bit. Then they had Jarrett Stidham last year. Now you have Jimmy G. You pay Jimmy G all this money. But from my point of Jimmy G, he was okay with the 49ers. Jimmy G won't the reason the 49ers went to the Super Bowl. It was the run game and the defense. So what do you see? What's the expectation for Jimmy G this year?
So I have the Raiders at 9-8 or 8-9. I don't think they're making the playoffs. And like you just said, Jimmy was a perfect manager for a loaded team in San Francisco. And like what we were saying the other week, I think that's why Brock was so successful, because he was able to manage a loaded team. Great offensive line, great defensive line, great wide receiving core, great cornerbacks, great safeties. Like they're great all over the field and they have depth. You go over to the Raiders, they have a very middle of the line or middle of the league offensive line. They were 17th in pressures allowed. They were tied 9th for sacks allowed, so that's good. He's not getting demolished all the time. And they were 13th in QB hurries. So like they're middle of the pack. They're not, pancaking people every single play, but they're also not letting their quarterback get his head taken off. The defense was bad last year. Oh my God, was it bad? Let me read you some of this stuff that I wrote down about their defense. 7th most points allowed in the league, 5th most yards allowed in the league, 4th most pass yards allowed, 31st in turnover percentage. There was one team that had a worse turnover percentage than the Raiders. And Derek Carr is not even like a turnover-prone QB. That's not his thing. Like people don't be like, oh man, Derek Carr is going to go out here and throw 4 picks. Like, no one, they just sucked. They turned the ball over so much. They were very middle of the road penalty wise. So like the defense, they weren't losing you games from penalties. They're losing it because they're letting the receivers get 200 yards a game on them. They did get better in free agency a little bit and through the draft. Tyree Wilson, 7th overall pick from Texas Tech. He's going to beef up that D-line that already has Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. So if your D-line can stay healthy, I think you'll be able to generate enough pressure to where They've got a new linebacker back there with Divine Diablo, who's from Virginia Tech. He played safety in college. He's been down at linebacker for the past 2 years, and they bring in another linebacker to help him out. Their secondary got a little bit better with some safety help, but I don't see them making this massive jump. I think they're going to split the games to the Chargers and the Broncos. I think they lose both to the Chiefs, and I think it ends up at 9-8 or 8-9. And I do not see them making the playoffs. Oh, also interesting thing I read. I think this came out today or last night, but ESPN reports are saying that Devontae Adams could be traded by the deadline.
What?
Now, that's from ESPN. It's not from me, so it's not me predicting anything. I'm just reporting what I'm reading.
No. I'm not blaming you. I'm talking to Mark Davis up here, the guy that made fun of his haircut on the show. What are you doing? Devontae Adams is the best receiver in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, that's not. I mean, and the issue with trading him is that he's so old that you can't get the return that you would expect from the best wide receiver in the league. You know, like he's too old to warrant asking for something outrageous.
Man. Well, I think here's the thing. You have general manager who is a former Patriot, I think it's Ziegler or something like that, and then you have Josh McDaniels. So I guess they're trying to run the Patriot way with the Raiders, I guess. Because, I mean, I think they got Jacoby Myers. They got a lot of Patriot guys. I think they still got Bolden, the running backs. They still got a lot of Patriot guys that we got rid of last year. So I don't know what's wrong with Josh McDaniels. I respect him. I look up to him. He's a good offensive coordinator. He's not a good head coach. He's a great offensive coordinator. No debate. One of the best offensive coordinators. One of the best offensive coordinators probably in national football. Now I understand. Oh, he had Tom Brady, but look what he did with Mac Jones. He took Mac Jones to the playoffs.
He also had Tim Tebow.
Oh well,
if we want to go back to that too, that was not a good experiment.
No, the Tim Tebow factor was not good. I don't know what's wrong with the Raiders and what they're trying to do. I think with looking at the schedule, it's a very, very, very tough schedule for the Raiders, by the way. You said they'll drop 2 to the Chiefs. But starting off, they play the Broncos, the improved Broncos. I think they're going to lose to that. I think they play the Broncos, Bills, the Steelers, the Chargers, the Packers, the Patriots. I think out of those 6 games, they might start about 2-4, 3-3. Already. Yeah. Now I understand.
Dude, honestly, not to interrupt you, they could start the season 0-4. Those first 4 teams are not easy teams.
Oh yeah,
they could. I'm not saying that they will, but it's definitely a possibility that they start 0-4.
Yeah, and especially the Patriots and the Raiders. That game where Jacoby Myers, I'm glad we cut that motherfucker because I don't know what the hell he was doing throwing that joke back. He thought Mac Jones was going to tackle Chandler Jones. I mean, that game cost us a playoff spot right there. That's the game that cost us a playoff spot. I'm just not sure about that. But with the Raiders, there's too many good teams in the AFC. I think they'll struggle. I think Jimmy G would be okay numbers-wise because they'll learn how to turn the ball over and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you saw what happened last year. The Raiders had the most 10 fourth, like they blew like 10 fourth quarter leads last year. Every time they're up by 10 plus points, they blew it. One of those games was against the Rams on Thursday Night Football where they had Baker Mayfield. I mean, Baker Mayfield threw the game winning touchdown. I mean, they just had a lot of leads they had. They blew it. They don't know how to finish games. That's just a problem. They don't know how to finish games, and they're going to struggle. Josh McDaniels might be out of a job, or if a fantasy story happens, Tom Brady comes out of retirement and plays for the Raiders. Which never say never. I mean, look what the Dolphins do. They try to get.
Are you allowed to do that if you're an owner?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, you could, but I never say never. I mean, anything can happen. I mean, Tom Brady could come out of retirement. I mean, he's around football. You know, he
Yeah.
said he wants to spend more time with his kids, but everybody has that itch when they want to come back. So I mean, unless Tom Brady come out of retirement, even though he'll be in Foxborough retiring in week 1, but I'm not sold on Vegas at all. We'll see how that goes. But I want to talk about the Arizona Cardinals.
Good
Are
Lord.
they tanking? Now, Kyler, we
Yeah.
don't know when Kyler Murray are coming back because he tore his ACL against the Patriots on Monday Night Football. They released Colt McCoy. I think that was very stupid to release Colt McCoy. He was a longtime veteran since 2010. He was a good quarterback for Texas. He went to the Browns. He's been everywhere. Washington Commanders. He's been everywhere. The quarterback competition, including John Giannis, said they won't name a starting quarterback because it gives them a competitive advantage against the Commanders. And I don't know what competitive advantage you're looking at.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Because you have between Josh Dobbs and Clayton Tune for the starting job. And Clayton Tune I think he played at the University of Houston. So what do you think about the Cardinals? And by the way, they're under speculation. Former coach Steve Wilkes, who was the defensive coordinator for the 49ers this year, filed something against Bidwell and Kine for a burner phone during the season when he was suspended. So there's a lot of things going on with the Cardinals organization. Are the Cardinals tanking and will they ever be the same team again? Like I said, they hadn't been the same team since 2015 when they had Bruce Arians and Carson Palmer.
Yeah, so I think it's very clear that they're tanking. Now, what are they tanking for? I don't know. Because if you tank, if you just look at their roster, it's bad. They do not have a very full roster at all. Soft wide receiver room. What's going on with Hollywood? We're seeing these videos of him not being able to get separation at all in practice. He's getting clamped, and I don't know like what they're tanking for because they just signed Kyler, obviously, just 160 million guaranteed, 230.5 million overall contract. And a lot of these incentives to get it up to 230 are just being on the 90-man roster and then getting from the 90-man roster to the 53-man roster. He's got like 12 million just there. Like that's the bonus. That's like it's not guaranteed, but like it's a guarantee, right? So you have all this money invested, and for most teams in the league outside of like the top 6 teams maybe in cap space, no one else can afford them. Like they'd have to immediately restructure this extension to even consider trading him anywhere if say that they're tanking to try and get a Caleb Williams or Drake May. Now, I don't think you do that because when healthy, Kyler is a top 10, 12 guy in the league, So, like, I don't think it's worth getting rid of him. And you're obviously paying him like a freaking top 5 quarterback in the league. So, I don't know what they're tanking for. The running back room's decent. Maybe if they're like, I don't know. I really don't know what they're trying to accomplish here by tanking because it seems like they have like if you were to tank in a way maybe to like you sell some of your valuable assets that you still have, and sell sounds very wrong. I didn't mean to put it like that, but you try to get rid of like say Hollywood. I don't even know what value he still has left, but you try to get something for him. You maybe no, because you can't even trade your decent running backs because nobody wants running backs and no one's going to give you a decent return. So I don't really know what the goal of this is, but I don't see them being the same for, a couple years at least. I think Gannon coming from the Eagles will bring a good culture. Same thing with Steichen in Indianapolis. Like I think the cultures that that Sirianni established in Philly, if they can bring it over there, but by being their own men, because you hear coaches all the time say, like as soon as you look inauthentic or you try to be someone else, players see through it. They hate it. That was a big thing with McDaniels in Denver. Like a bunch of Denver players were like, dude, you're not Bill Belichick. Please stop trying to be Bill Belichick. So I think if Gannon can come to Arizona, establish a similar culture to the Eagles, but with his own twist, they could be good in a couple years, but I don't know what the goal of this tank is for, because I think even if you still have Colt McCoy, you're gonna excuse me, you're gonna have a top 7 pick in the draft anyways. And then they got another first from Houston. Houston traded back up to get the back-to-back picks, right? They got CJ and then they got Will Anderson. So they have capital there. Maybe you tank and you have 2 top 10 picks, but I think even with Colt McCoy, they were still going to have a top 10 pick. I don't know what the goal is. It just seems like such a cluster right now. I don't see a positive in the next couple years at all.
Well, I don't either. And the Cardinals will be irrelevant, like I said. Thank God that Bruce Arians finally won the Super Bowl with Tampa Bay and Tom Brady. But we thought, the Cardinals were that team with Carson.
Guy as well.
Yes, we thought the Cardinals were that team that would go to Super Bowl with Carson Palmer. They just ran out of gas. He retired. Then came back to coaching. With the Cardinals, the Cliff Kingsbury thing didn't work. I told people Cliff Kingsbury woke the guy. By the way, I understand Cliff Kingsbury coached Pat Mahomes, but he was 35-40 in college with Pat Mahomes. Okay?
Yeah,
with Pat Mahomes. He only got the job because at Texas Tech because he coached Johnny Manziel. That's the only reason why he got the job at Texas Tech. He coached Johnny Manziel, and all the hype surrounding. That's how we knew who Cliff Kingsbury was, but. I guess Cliff Kingsbury is also offensive coordinator for USC this year, so he's going back to the college ranks this year. So you'll hear plenty of Cliff Kingsbury in college. He's a good college coach. I think he's a good offensive coordinator. Like not comparing him to Josh McDaniels, he's a good offensive coordinator. But at the same time, I'm not sold on the Cardinals. They won't do anything. They're a hot mess. They're garbage. I wouldn't be surprised if Steve Keim and whoever else, Michael Bidwell, will no longer be together, or what happens in the future, what the lawsuit will be due to the Burrow situation. So let's see how the Cardinals do. Like I said, the Cardinals are going to be terrible. But that brings on to the next topic in the NFL. Who's the best QB that you'll have on your roster, or who's the best QB in the NFL? Is it Joe Burrow? Is it Pat Mahomes? I am taking Pat Mahomes, ladies and gentlemen. Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. Now, no disrespect to Joe Burrow. Okay, Pat Mahomes' playoff record is 11-3. Joe Burrow's is 5-2. I understand Joe Burrow got hurt in 2019 towards ACL and whatnot, but over the past 2 years, Joe Burrow's thrown over 30-plus touchdowns. But Pat Mahomes, ever since being the starter in 2018, he threw for 50 touchdowns. And gets like 50 and 12 interceptions or 13 and whatnot. But ever since he's been a starter in Kansas City, they always make the AFC Championship game. He's won 2 Super Bowls. They've been in the AFC Championship game every single year since the Patriots and Tom Brady's last time that they made it. They've been there every single year. They won 2 Super Bowls. They lost one, which was against the Bucks, of course. 3 offensive linemen. But Pat Mahomes, ladies and gentlemen, is the greatest quarterback. He's not the greatest quarterback of all time. He would never be better than Tom Brady unless he gets 8 rings. He has to get 8. He has to get more rings than Tom Brady. He's a flashy guy. He can throw. Okay? He can throw. He's flashy. He can run. He has a good coach, Andy Reid. Like I said, Pat Mahomes made Andy Reid. Just like Tom Brady made Belichick. Because what did Andy Reid do with the Eagles? He took the Eagles to the Super Bowl. They had Donovan McNabb, Brian Westbrook, Terrell Owens. They made the Super Bowl, but Donovan McNabb wasn't a top-tier guy. And then they had one season, I guess they played Kevin Cobb at quarterback. And then, there was one time where,
Mike Vick years were good.
Yeah, the Mike Vick years was good, but they weren't up there. But Pat Mahomes has just put the game on a different level where he could just do everything. He can throw, he can run. It's a younger version. Michael Vick, by the time he was good, he was at the end of his career though, because he ended up playing for the Eagles, the Jets, the Steelers.
Yeah, but he was 3 years out of football. He was slower. Yeah, he wasn't.
From that scenario, but I think no disrespect to Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has beaten Pat Mahomes 2-3 times. He has beaten him. He's beaten him in the regular season. Last year they had a chance to beat Pat Mahomes and won for roughing the passer. Oh my God, there was no need for that. They give him extra 15 yards and put him in field goal range to hit the game-winning field goal. But Joe Burrow is not a quarterback you want to see, boy. I respect Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, like I said, is my number 2 quarterback. I think he's better than Josh Allen, as of now. But Joe
Right.
Burrow's a pocket passer. He took the Bengals to a Super Bowl with a bad offensive line in 2021. He got sacked, I think, over about 40, 50 times. Took a bad O-line to the Super Bowl. Last year, he took it to the AFC Championship game. So the Bengals are that team you need to watch out for. But as of right now, if I'm the GM of an NFL team, I want to take Pat Mahomes over Joe Burrow. What is your take on that?
I'm with you. At the end of the day, when you're comparing two QBs, it's like what you just said. Pat won't be better than Brady unless he's got. I think if he gets the same amount of rings, um, I would say Pat would be above Tom just from a numbers perspective. If they have the same amount of Super Bowls, now that's saying that he's going to have to win 5 more Super Bowls. So I'm not going to just go like, oh yeah, he's definitely going to do it. But I think if they have the same, if he somehow gets to 7, and Tom obviously also has 7, I'm taking Pat. That's just probably recency bias, but I mean, he's the most electric guy that's been in the league for years. And when you're comparing two guys against each other, it's rings over everything. So obviously, Pat has had more time in the league, and he was given way better of a scenario to come in. That the handoff from Alex Smith to Pat Mahomes is better than most other teams, minus maybe Brett to Aaron. Like they were winning 11 games a year, 10 games a year on a 16 game schedule with Alex Smith. So like that handoff was beautiful for Pat. He came into a team that was already ready to win versus, the Bengals earned Joe Burrow by being the worst team in the league. Like that's how they got Joe. Um, the only stat that Joe has on Pat is completion percentage, and I think it's like 66% to 68%. So it's not, blowing him out of the water or anything. Um, and then, I mean, not that we have to hark on it too much, but like Pat threw for the most yards of his career last year with a less than great wide receiver core without Tyreek Hill. Now, you have Travis Kelce, who's like the yak leader for tight ends and like will go down, I think, by the time he retires, uh, as the best tight end of all time, maybe top 2 behind. I mean, you could say Tony Gonzalez is probably the overall number 1 in most old heads' eyes. But I think Travis is going to surpass him by the time he retires. I don't think there's too much to talk about. Joe is great. I also think he's the second best in the league, and I've got Josh at third. But Pat, until knock on wood, I hope it doesn't happen, but until some like just catastrophic failure happens with Pat Mahomes, I don't think you can take any quarterback in the league over him at all.
Whew. Well, that was a good take on that because I think a lot of people think Joe Burrow is better. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand Joe Burrow was drafted right after Pat Mahomes was selected, or 2 years after. But ladies and gentlemen, Pat Mahomes, if you've seen quarterback on Netflix, he's apparently the better quarterback. I love Joe Burrow. I love me some Joey Burrow. He is great. But Pat Mahomes is the quarterback. Unless he gets a ACL injury or something crazy, we don't know. But I think,
and he's not crazy mobile either. Like he doesn't. He has more yards on the ground than Joe does for sure. But I think both of them are athletic enough to be effective on the ground, but they're not causing the defense to like what we were talking about earlier with the Nebraska game. Like they don't need a spy to be there. Watch like you would with Lamar. Like you don't have a spy that's sitting, or even Josh. Like I'm sure there's you wouldn't bring a nickel in to try and tackle Josh. That's got to be a linebacker. But I do think that like they're both athletic enough to get some stuff moving on the ground, but it's not, it's not big enough to be like, oh wow, this dude's groundwork brings him over the gap with Pat. They're both suitable on the ground, but it's not a factor that really contributes to this, I don't think.
Second to last thing, with the NBA, Giannis does not believe in the Bucks long term. The Bucks fired Mike Budenholzer after this past season after losing to the Miami Heat. There was speculation that in the 2024-2025 season, that the Lakers and the Knicks have interest in Giannis Antetokounmpo. How do you feel about this? And like you said, it's the NBA. Anything could happen. But Giannis has already won a championship, but he doesn't like the direction, going forward, by the way. So we'll see how that goes. How do you feel about Giannis? What is the situation like? Do you think this will happen in the next 2 years?
Well, it definitely could. The roster as of today is clearly not as good as that 2021 championship team. His exact words were, "I'm not going to re-sign until I'm comfortable that the organization is still committed to winning a championship." So if he sees any moves that resemble anything close to a rebuild, he's out. They just re-signed Middleton and Lopez, which are two good starters. Lopez obviously turned into one of the best shooting threes and three shooting bigs in the league. So that's got value in itself. And then you've got Chris Middleton, great number two behind Giannis. And they still have Drew Holiday, who's arguably the best defender at the guard position, maybe behind Marcus Smart. So, and I think both of them, you could trade either one of them off as the best guard defender in the league. I don't know about the Knicks. So the Knicks are always in conversations for for superstars, and that's solely because they're in New York. The Knicks haven't been any, even with Melo, they weren't doing stuff so. I don't think the Knicks are going to be in contention. Their name is always in there, but I don't think they'll be in contention seriously to land them. And I'm not going to just assume that the Bucks are going to fold and try to rebuild. The roster obviously isn't as good as it was, but that's not to say that they can't make it better. I don't think this might be a UNC bias a little bit, but I don't think Grayson Allen is a starting shooting guard in the league. I think he's a good rotation guy to come off, maybe 6th or 7th man, but he cannot be the starting shooting guard for an 82-game season and into the playoffs for a championship team. It just can't happen. I think Dante leaving he's at New York now, but I think Dante DiVincenzo was a much better player to be in that role than Grayson is now. Pat Connaughton is obviously a dog. He's going to make it shake every time he's on the court. That's another ACC throwback Notre Dame guy. He would raise hell against UNC back in the day. But I don't think that the Bucks are necessarily going towards rebuild mode just because the roster isn't up to that same level that it was a couple years ago. But I do think that before the trade deadline this year, or maybe early free agency next year, they're going to have to make a decent move if they want to convince Giannis that it's worth him staying. Now, obviously for the Bucks, it's worth for them to sign him I think they can sign him to a 3-year extension or something because his supermax isn't all the way up yet. So it's not like they can sign him to another 6-year deal or whatever. I think it's got to be a little bit smaller, which would work into his interest if he doesn't trust the long-term future. Now, how long-term is he thinking? That's up for him to say publicly. We don't know. But I think a 2 or 3 year extension on top of it, he gets more money, which obviously at this point, the money really isn't a thing for him. After you sign a supermax, you're pretty much set, but I think at the end of 2 years, maybe if the team is getting the number 1 seed and losing to an 8 seed at the beginning of the playoffs, I don't think I do think that would be a quick push for in his mind. Be like, all right, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, the Bucks, I think they're competitive, but they had a chance, I think, the year before to beat my Boston Celtics, which would never happen. They folded. They were up 3-2 in the series. Boston came back and won. Boston's the team to watch out for. Possibly Philly, maybe, if they can beat the Celtics. Not just that, but the James Harden stuff. I mean, can we stop?
We should talk about that next show. Next show. Let's get into the Sixers too, because I got a lot to say about the Sixers.
Yeah, we'll get to Sixers next show. The Miami Heat's a team. They went to the NBA Finals last year, so we'll see how the NBA goes. But Lambo Water Sports, presented by Sideline Sports Network. It's a great episode on Friday. We got college football anyway tomorrow and Sunday and Monday because it's Labor Day weekend. I'll be tuning in on the Virginia Tech game against Old Dominion later. But the first game I'll be watching tomorrow is TCU in Colorado. So that's it for Totem Sports. Lambo Water Sports featuring MattPatt. We'll be catching you later on. We'll probably get an episode out probably by Sunday, Monday, whenever. We'll see how it goes. But I fought through my sickness. Totem Pole will be catching you later on.